So, the Netflix Devil May Cry anime. The hottest, newest, and most controversial addition to the Devil May Cry franchise in a while. It's quite a popular punching bag from what I can see, with everyone wanting a piece of the pie. And I can see why people would be wanting to talk about it, because there are a lot of things to discuss, both good and bad. Which certainly isn't helped by the stardom of lead creator Adi Shankar. Ugh. That, however, isn't a rabbit hole I'm going into today, because I want to talk about a different rabbit hole altogether. Put simply, my thoughts on the show can be summarized as such. The animation is fine, the voice acting is great with special attention being given to Kevin Conroy as Baines and Hoon Lee as the White Rabbit, but the actual writing is messy and all over the place. Especially when we talk about the topic of today, the themes of Devil May Cry and how the Netflix adaptation misses the mark by trying to make a morally gray conflict. To me, the biggest disrespect an adaptation can do, more than simply getting the characters wrong or botching the world, is misinterpreting or just flat out ignoring the themes that lie at the core of the original source material. Themes are the lifeblood of media, through which character arcs, plot points, even action scenes are formed. Without themes, your ideas and characters have no substance. And it is often the mark of a disingenuous adaptation or creator when the themes of the original are either unfaithfully adapted, or alternatively just completely cast away for a set of characters and themes that are unrecognizable, because the director thinks their vision fits the material better. Many long-term viewers to the channel may recall the days when I ranted at length about the synopsis and themes of the Monster movie way back when it was leaked, calling it a disgrace of a series and something that doesn't understand the core of Monster Hunter. Because at the end of the day, Monster Hunter is about that delicate balance between monster and humankind, the steps we take to preserve the ecosystem and coexist. It's how we as a culture can not just survive, but thrive and define ourselves off our interactions with the world. There's color, there's whimsy, there's joy, there's merchandising of monsters, there's research and ecology, but there's also a balance of struggle and knowing that things have to be done for the sake of safety and preservation. And what do you know, the movie misses the mark completely by painting the world of Monster Hunter as dreary, dire, savage, uncivilized, and overall unpleasant, masquerading as a faithful adaptation because it has characters and monsters from the game, all while Anderson once again gets off to making fanfiction starring his wife and an isekai plotline as Capcom breathes down his neck to get the toes of the Black Diablos right. Regardless of whatever good qualities you could argue for the Monster movie, it fails in my mind because it doesn't understand or translate any of what makes Monster Hunter so appealing, so distinct as a world at its core. The Devil May Cry anime fails in much the same way, and it all comes down to a single word: humanity. Devil May Cry at its core is incredibly pro-human. Throughout every single one of the games, it makes a constant point that despite the monstrous strength of the demons, humanity will always win out in the end. Not because of strength, but because of heart. Humanity has heart, empathy, feeling, and kindness in spades over the demons who, for the vast majority of the series, are nothing more than slobbering beasts desperately vying for power and domination. They are a culture that knows nothing more than the philosophy of might makes right. It's why Argisax and Mundus fought in the past as bitter rivals for control over the demon world. It's why Burial, Mundus' canonical son, takes over the Fire Hell in his father's absence. It's why Balrog then takes over the Fire Hell after Burial's defeat, submitting to Dante once he sees how powerful he truly is. Goliath has a whole speech in 5 to Nero, but he plans to take advantage of a Qliphoth wanting to use the fruit that is literally born from the blood of millions of humans to become king of the underworld. Humans, even at the most basic, fundamental level of their blood, have a special quality that demons lack. It is right there in the narrative, clear as day. In fact, let's go over each of the games and see how they did this, shall we? Devil May Cry 1, despite its older quality and direction by Kamiya, laid the foundation for this exact idea for the franchise. Trish is a demon construct made in the image of Dante's mother Eva, to lure in Dante and ultimately kill him. She is in every way designed to be evil, a puppet made to carry out a single purpose. But through the course of the game, she grows to develop an emotional, human attachment to Dante, not knowing why he would risk his life to save her. Again, it's cheesy, and some of the writing is a bit off considering what would be said later, but the core of Dante's speech to her is that no mere devil would be capable of feeling empathy, and thus Trish in some way is human. See also Nello Angelo resisting Mundus's mind control and being revealed as Virgil. Devil May Cry 2 follows much the same principle with Lucia. She's a demon that was mass-produced by Arius, but was thrown away as a defect and adopted by the protectors of Villa de Marly to defend the island against would-be invaders. When her origin is revealed to her, she is doubtful of her own humanity, believing that at any moment she could become just like any other demon and needs to be put out of her misery. Like Trish, the lesson she learns is that she is more than what she was made to be, and through her upbringing is proof of being human, finally able to defeat the mutated Arius. As a prequel game, Devil May Cry 3 explores the early days of Dante's career before the events of 1 and 2. He is brash, hot-headed, cocky, confident, but most importantly, incredibly unserious. When Virgil resurrects Vitemini Gru in the middle of a city, possibly killing hundreds if not thousands of people, Dante heads out not to stop Virgil because it is the right thing to do, but because he thinks it would be fun to see and fight Virgil once more. Cut to several hours later, and Dante gets his ass beat. Through this defeat, as well as his exchanges with Lady, a fellow soul in suffering, he starts to slowly embrace the responsibilities handed down to him as Sparda's son. He sees the guilt and weight that Lady carries on her back, the pain that her father caused, and cannot afford to turn a blind eye to the situation, much less his own heritage. In this way, Dante accepts both sides of himself, but mainly his humanity to connect with and care for Lady. It's why he fights and ultimately convinces her to back down, the two finally seeing eye to eye, with Lady seeing humanity in the half-demon hybrid. He ascends and literally fights his own shadow, memories of the enemies of the past, and takes on Arkham with Virgil, who in every way is designed from gameplay, story, and visuals to be a disgusting, disappointing blob that threw away their humanity because they coveted the power of a demon.
Making a big dramatic entrance and stealing my spotlight.
You don't possibly believe that he deserves to be our main event now, do you?
Now that you mention it, you're right.
And then, finally at the border between worlds, the two half-demon brothers fight one more time, with Dante ultimately triumphing over Virgil because of his newfound motivation, responsibility, and humanity in taking down Virgil. But he isn't able to save him, and this one act haunts him for the rest of his life. It's why Dante tries to hide the pain behind a mask of jokes and confidence, why he names his new devil hunting business after a comment Lady says, to deal with the pain of losing the only family he had left, to find some way to atone for it. With the added chronology of 3, Devil May Cry 4 becomes very interesting in terms of the themes of humanity, and how it adds extra context to Dante's character. Going off the ending in 3, it is quite easy to make the inference that Dante is at an all-time low in 1 and especially 2, becoming colder in the years after Virgil's death. In 1, he gets jumped and betrayed by Trish multiple times, and while is able to find a new ally by the end of it, he still is unable to let go of the feeling of looking at a ghost with Trish, especially after finding his brother once more, only to see him as a brainwashed puppet and being forced to kill him. Ouch. And with no meaningful connections or actual family in 2, he becomes truly isolated and decides to risk it all by going to hell in the end. So when in 4 he meets a bratty, rebellious Nero, he must feel quite a bit of nostalgia. Here is someone who Dante sees a lot of himself in, so brash, confident, and punk-like, all while having a sneaking suspicion on Nero's relationship to Dante through his demon heritage. He is positively glowing with excitement the whole game, relishing in being able to test and mentor Nero, while simultaneously wisecracking and blowing for the opposition in his way. Said opposition, by the way, being a fanatical, religious, overzealot cult that worships Sparda, not for his humanity, but for his power and nature as a demon, plotting to take over the world by harnessing demonic power, and creating a false doomsday scenario where Fortuna will be saved by a godlike demon, literally called the Savior. Like, bruh, the message is literally right there. And all the while, you have Nero, who, like Dante in 3, learns to come to terms with his responsibility and humanity, climbing out of the demonic bowels of a savior to rescue his girlfriend and stop Sanctus, all while looking the most demonic of the main cast thanks to the devil arm he permanently has. There are so many instances or cutscenes in this game I could use to extend my point, but I'll just leave it there and move on. Devil May Cry 5, as the chronological end of the original timeline, naturally wraps up many of the overall themes and story arcs that have been running throughout. As a result, there are a lot of things I could talk about here in terms of humanity, so here's just a few. Dante's conflict has his greatest mistake come back to haunt him, being given one last chance to send his brother on his way and stop his plans. He knows about Nero's heritage, trying to save the boy from any potential trauma by involving himself in this whole affair. He gains a new level of power after being defeated by Urizen, transforming at the site of his old home and absorbing the broken blade that represents and is named after Sparda's rebellion against demonkind for humanity, forming his own devil sword, by the way. By the end of the journey, he fights Virgil one last time, and joins him in closing off the Clyphont from the underworld. He is trapped there forever, but is content knowing that Nero is around to continue their legacy, and that he can spend time making amends with and keeping an eye on Virgil. Nero is all about being stripped away from a sense of familiarity and power, trying to prove himself in the eyes of everyone. In his first initial clash against Urizen, Nero is called dead weight by Dante, unable to understand why Dante keeps trying to push him away, only able to think about vengeance even with a single arm. He repeatedly tries to prop himself up, and while he is powerful, he ultimately feels like he is playing catch-up, especially once Dante is back in the picture. When Urizen and V recombine into Virgil, he finds out that Virgil is his long-lost father, and is unable to comprehend what this means. His whole life he has spent as an orphan, raised and loved by Kyrie and Credo, and now the moment he has some semblance of a biological family, he risks losing everything over a stupid blood feud. So he jumps in the way, finding the human strength to grow back his arm and awaken his true demonic power. He becomes the single strongest character in the series, stopping both Dante and Virgil in their Sin Devil Trigger forms at once, and forces them to not only validate and accept his humanity, but his existence. All that time in the shadows, the frustrations boiling through him, now finding his place in the legacy of Sparda because of his overwhelming humanity. And V? He's just Virgil's humanity as a person. Take all the trauma, the pain, the isolation inflicted upon Virgil in his childhood, all the physical and mental torture inflicted by Mundus as Nello Angelo, all the humanity that has done nothing but seemingly hurt him this whole time, and cast it out. This new do-or-die existence V finds himself in forces him to recollect on everything he has done, to look at and accept the trauma he carries with Griffin, Shadow, and Nightmare, minions of Mundus from DMC1, and reconcile. Despite crumbling away into dust, he finds the strength to fuse back into Virgil with his demonic half Urizen, not only restoring him fully, but elevating him to the same level as Dante now that he has the knowledge and experience from both perspectives. He ponders what it would be like if they swapped places, if their lives were different, and decides to settle everything on one last fight against Dante for good old times. He's still a head-ass by the end, needing to be slammed into the ground by Nero for him to not be a dick, but overall, he's in a much better state. He leaves behind his book of poems for Nero as a memento, and joins Dante in cutting off the Clyphot, spending their days bantering, dueling, and killing demons to make up for lost time. So, with all that out of the way, how does the Netflix anime compare in utilizing its themes of humanity? It doesn't. It doesn't just not work, it flat out doesn't even try. The theme of humanity that the whole series has built its identity off of is barely used in the Netflix anime. If anything, it almost feels like the show is embarrassed to show itself engaging with the themes because it would be seen as childish. Instead, we get yet another boring, dull gray, lame as fuck, and overused theme of humanity being the actual bad guys here. Or in this case, a touch of American colonialism. Why, you may ask? It's simple, really. Because the show wants to portray the demons as immigrants from another world. People who are just like us and are trying to make it by, finding a safe place to live. You could almost say, as if they are from a Middle Eastern origin, when the show itself takes place in and bases a lot of its OST off of the early to mid-2000s. There has been a lot of controversy around this decision, and while I myself have no problem with political theming in my media, part of the reason why it feels so wrong in the Netflix adaptation is because there are some weird and just outright gross implications. For example, if we are led to believe that demons are just like us, which the show tries to make a point of by demystifying their magic and abilities to just technology and being really good at quantum mechanics, or by showing refugees when Lady in Darkcom storm the White Rabbit's hideout, then why does Dante talk about feeling a surge of anger and dark hatred when accessing his Devil Trigger transformation? Why is his demon heritage treated as if it's a dark monster for him to tame and control? Something beastly and otherworldly. That is not something I have found or heard anywhere in any of the games or official material. And what does that say about the demons in the show that they are trying so hard to make us sympathize for? Are we supposed to think of them as all having some cursed blood or inner hatred within themselves, beasts that had to learn to control themselves? Well, no, that can't be right, because look, they are people too! Look at those completely normal human demons, where the only slightly different thing about them are the ridges of spikes on their head, completely smoothing over and beautifying their appearance to make us sympathize with them, instead of the bad and evil boss demons from the game. It is such a cheap trick to gain false sympathy points from the audience with the narrative they are trying to create, on top of not using any of the other lower class demons they could have used from the games. The only reason why I can think that such a comment is made about Dante's Devil Trigger is because it's being equated and made into some kind of Super Saiyan or Spartan Rage transformation. Which even then, said transformation only happens because the plot forces him to accept that he is the son of Sparda. It doesn't really equate to anything for his character. He doesn't have to grow up and take responsibility. He doesn't have to embrace his humanity and empathize with Lady, and he doesn't take action. He instead reacts to almost everything within the show, never really taking the lead as the main character, and shows a shockingly incompetent win-to-loss ratio, even though the first few episodes set him up as an absolute monster. Here's another example. In episode 7, when Lady confronts the White Rabbit, she attempts to point out his hypocrisy. The White Rabbit tries to fight for the rights and freedom of the lower class underworld citizens, or Makaians as they are referred to here, wanting to free them from the toxic air and misery of Makai under the rule of Mundus. All of this stemming from his deep personal history with the people of Makai and the loss he has experienced. Despite that, he is willing to torture, experiment with, and kidnap many lower-class Makaians for his army, or alternatively use them as hostages as already mentioned with the White Rabbit's hideout. The intent here is to make the White Rabbit as a tragic figure who goes too far with his methods, losing sight of those he loves for the sake of his own goals, in a way losing his humanity. That would at least be the character if he was in the games, and would tie into the theme of humanity throughout. But instead, since this is the Netflix anime, he brings up how he is merely adopting the tactics of a cruel, terrifying power, aka the United States, and that at the core of it, humanity is the true evil here for allowing this cruelty. And instead of refuting his point or seeing through his bullshit, the show and Lady says nothing about it. If anything, the show and Lady agree with him, which is made all the more baffling when in the finale, the most infamous moment in the whole series besides Lady's swearing occurs. The US invading and colonizing Makai to the sounds of American Idiots by Green Day. The allegory and symbolism isn't even subtle. And even if Lady did try to refute Rabbit's point, the ending ultimately goes to show that he was right in this assessment there. Which is incredibly fucked up when the dude has the logic of just opening the rift between Earth and Makai, never minding not only all the innocents from Earth that would be killed, but also all the people from Makai that he supposedly cares about also dying. Or how this could also just give Mundus the excuse to conquer Earth and further expand his cruelty. And to top it all off, the allegory completely blows up in its face when you realize that the show accidentally sets up Mundus and Virgil as the good guys. Mundus, the big bad overlord of the underworld, who tried to subjugate everything under his rule, killed Dante's family, and brainwashed Virgil in the games, is now justified in the anime for retaliation. America is conquering and subjugating Makai, bombing survivors and making internment camps, and Virgil, who is working alongside Mundus, is freeing them in retaliation to take back their freedom. This isn't even a both sides are bad kind of conflict like he was pretending to be. Mundus is just straight up the good guy because there was no event orchestrated by him that caused America's invasion as retaliation, making the whole allegory to the War on Terror extremely terrible. But for a final examination of why the anime is an utter disgrace to the themes of Devil May Cry, let's talk about the treatment of the legendary Dark Knight himself, Sparda. Let me ask a question for people in the audience, and bear with me on this. Why is the downfall of Lucifer such an important moment in literature, one that gets replicated across all of media? What makes Lucifer such a fascinating character that so many stories and characters would be based off of him? It's simple, really. Because despite being God's favorite angel, one who knew the difference between right and wrong, blessed and showered with love and praise, he still chose to do wrong. It's the juxtaposition of his nature that such a divinely crafted creation, so perfect and pure, would willingly choose to rebel against God and his fellow angels that makes him such an iconic character and the scene so memorable. Sparda is much the same way, but in reverse. He is a demon who served long ago in the armies of Mundus, waging wars and conquering in the name of cruelty because that's all he knew. As we established earlier in the video, that is the nature of demons in Devil May Cry, and 99% of demons submit to that philosophy of might makes right, and they wouldn't even think of doing anything else about it because that is all they know. That is how they were born. Which makes the line of Sparda waking up to justice, as cheesy as it is, so iconic and powerful. Because in a single moment, Sparda formed the concepts of empathy, compassion, justice, love, and right and wrong in his head, something that took millions of years for humans to develop, despite his nature as a demon. He willingly made the decision to go against his birth, to do what is right for the people he loves, for the newfound humanity that gives him the strength to fight and win against all of hell, to marry a human wife and have children, to not just seal the two worlds, but to split his power across multiple relics. He is a hero in every sense of the word, doing whatever it takes for the sake of love and justice, and instilling in his children and grandchildren that same sense of justice. Which makes his treatment in the Netflix anime infuriating. It's bad enough having Lady cuss and joke about the whole story, downplaying his accomplishments, but it is entirely different when the story and character says that him doing all of this is not only the least he could do, but is a moral gray because it locked away all those Machaians to suffer at the hand of Mundus, supposedly. I'm sorry, but that is the most that he could do. And the show's insufferable attitude of trying to make everything so morally gray, so melodramatic, so anti-human, all for the sake of a shitty analogy and fake complexity, ruins everything. It ruins Dante's character because he has no heroic example to live up to, no one to show as a testament of his humanity. It ruins Virgil's character because he relies entirely on the refusal of his humanity, valuing his father's demonic heritage and wanting to surpass him as the strongest, so that way he can never feel hurt or lost ever again. And it ruins Lady's character by making her an insufferable, racist brat who is unable to see the humanity in Dante because of his own growth, thereby unable to move on from her own past and accept her new humanity as Lady going forward. I am tired, more than anything, of all this pessimism and anti-human mentality in the modern era. I am tired of the media constantly shoving this insufferable and depressing message down our throats about our own cruelty and how we are monsters, how it thinks it is so complex and deep And the idea that empathy is a weakness, especially in this era. It reminds me of why I love stories like Gurren Lagann. The value in believing in the human will, even in the darkest of times. How it can raise us up and drive us forward. Because now more than ever, we need kindness. We need empathy. We need humanity. And for as simple as they may appear to be, the Devil May Cry games offer them in spades. So support the games. Buy and play them if you haven't already. They are some of the best, genre-defining character action games of all time. And if you already have them, maybe consider playing them again, whether to enjoy the balls-to-the-wall stylish combat, or to gain a newfound appreciation for the simple but sincere storytelling. It certainly beats getting berated by Netflix ladies rioting, that's for sure. I have been the Monarch of Dragons, and I thank you all for watching. You all take care of yourselves out there, and until next time, have a fantastic day, /night, wherever you live. Peace, and Gloosvolt. Also, please let this be bait, 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 I swear to God, please let this be bait!